Sir, I can't hear you.
What about now? Can you hear me? Yes, excellent. Don't know what that was. Just unplugged the microphone and plugged it back in. Technology, eh? Right, let's go back. Okay, so the first bit, we're having a look at Hitler's foreign policy. This is what Hitler promised to do when he became leader, if he was elected leader of Germany. So from the outset, the world should have been a little bit worried because his foreign policy makes it look like he is going to start another war. And we're going to have a look at that foreign policy in a moment. But firstly, you've got to remember that Hitler was elected on a promise to right the wrongs of the Treaty of Versailles. Much of Germany's suffering throughout the 1920s and even throughout up to the mid-1930s had been attributed to the Treaty of Versailles. The people hated it. So this pledge would have been extremely popular, especially because 6 million Germans were unemployed by 1933. This is hugely significant. It really is, because people were suffering. When people suffered, the Nazi Party did very well. So what did Hitler promise them? What did Hitler promise the people if they voted for him? Well, firstly, he promised that he would get them back to work, okay? Bread and work was the promise. But when you delve a little bit deeper, he also said that he wanted to achieve Lebensraum, a key word that you should be able to talk about in your exam when you talk about what Hitler wants to achieve in Europe. Okay, there's a question on the exam where you will probably and should be talking about these things. So Lebensraum, Hitler wants land in the east, living space, room to live in the east. So Poland should be worried, Czechoslovakia should be worried, countries to the east of Germany. He promised to rearm Germany. This was part of his work program, putting people back to work by making bombs and planes and tanks and ships and ammunition and uniforms and everything else that the military needs. It would help to solve the unemployment crisis. And one of the things that Hitler promised the people of Germany was a Luftwaffe, an air force, something that Germany had been banned from developing under the Treaty of Versailles. So it's like a double attack here, isn't it? It's a two-pronged attack. In rearming, he solves the unemployment crisis, but he also sticks two fingers up to the Treaty of Versailles, two things that the public would have loved him for. Okay, so you can understand why the Nazis were popular. Also, he wanted to reunite the German speakers into a greater Germany. Because of the Treaty of Versailles, we had lots of Germans now living in foreign countries. 3 million Germans now lived in Czechoslovakia, not through choice, but because their area of Germany was given to Czechoslovakia after the Treaty of Versailles. So Hitler said that he wanted to reunite the Volksdeutsche, the German speakers living in different parts of Europe. He wants to unite them. How is he going to achieve that? Probably through war. Is he going to invade other countries to protect these people? Well, we know he does with Czechoslovakia. But before you know the future, if you lived when Hitler was proclaiming these promises, you would be quite worried if you didn't live in Germany. And lastly, the last part of his foreign policy is the destruction of communism. So the USSR, Stalin had to be incredibly worried about this. Now, Stalin hated Britain and France. They were his capitalist enemies, but because of Hitler's promise to destroy communism, that forced Stalin to start developing better relations with Britain and France. It makes sense, doesn't it? If Hitler wants to destroy your country, then you better start looking for friends. Unfortunately, Britain and France don't really value this friendship, and that starts to push Stalin into Hitler's bosom, as it were, because Stalin feels betrayed by Britain and France. He feels that they aren't going to protect him, and that encourages him to sign the Nazi-Soviet pact, which we will talk about later on. And it was that pact which really encouraged Hitler to invade Poland and start a war. So maybe if Britain and France were a little bit nicer to Stalin, World War II could have been avoided. But who knows? So, Hitler's foreign policy. If you're making notes, you've got this in your books. And this book is on Caboodle, which you can have access to. And I am going to publish this whole revision session on YouTube. So you can go back to this and revise with the pause button and a pen and paper if I'm moving too quickly. Okay, so let's move on to the reaction to Hitler's foreign policy. You would have hoped that it would have been a strong reaction, because you've got to remember how weak Germany was in 1933 when Hitler took power. Germany was incredibly weak. And if France or Britain decided to invade Germany to stop them doing or breaking the Treaty of Versailles, then they had that option. They could have done that. But unfortunately, they didn't. And we're going to talk about why they didn't react to Hitler's foreign policy now. Okay, so Britain. Neville Chamberlain is now in charge of Britain. Right? And although people were worried about Hitler's speeches, it did worry the British government there, Hitler signed a non-aggression pact with Poland. And that convinced many politicians in Britain that Hitler did not want war. And we know now that Hitler was a big fat liar, and he wasn't scared about lying about things to ensure that he got his way now. And I think this was a way of diverting attention away from him. So look, I'm not being aggressive. I'm not going to touch Poland. You all think that we're going to invade Poland to get the land back that we lost to Poland after World War I. And Hitler says, no, I'm not going to do that. And I will sign a non-aggression pact with him. Okay. Also, why people didn't react straight away, the British didn't react straight away to Hitler's foreign policy, was the horrors of World War I. People could still remember the horrors of World War I. And as a result of that, they would do almost anything. The British people and the British government would do almost anything to avoid another world war. And if that meant turning a blind eye to some of what Hitler wanted to do, then so be it. Okay? They would. And that leads me on to this keyword down in the third paragraph, appeasement. This is the policy that Chamberlain and the British government used towards Hitler and his foreign policy aims. It means literally to give him a little bit of what he wants in the hope that you keep him happy so he doesn't do something crazy like start another war. Unfortunately, and we've seen this looking at the past, with the policy of appeasement, it allowed Hitler to grow increasingly confident until he got to a stage where he didn't really care about what Britain and France said. He created a strong military, and the ball was really in his court. So, appeasement was the policy used by Britain towards Hitler and his foreign policy aims. And appeasement made sense when Hitler took over, because although when the Treaty of Versailles was first written, there were many people in Britain that felt that actually it was fair, but it could have been harsher. There were plenty of people in the British government that felt it was fair, but probably could have been and should have been harsher. By the time that Hitler takes control, and people have seen all the hardships that Germany have been through, there are many people in Britain and the British government that felt that the treaty was unbelievably harsh, and that Germany should be allowed to reclaim some of what they'd lost. Let's take the Rhineland, for example, the remilitarization of the Rhineland. The Americans said that it was just Hitler marching his troops into his own backyard. And that kind of makes sense. It's the same as what Britain thought. So they were willing to turn a blind eye to some of his foreign policy aims if it meant that it kept him happy and we avoided another war. One person, or one of the few, that did not support appeasement was Winston Churchill. He believed it was a mistake. He believed it let Hitler off the hook too easily. So, Britain had its own issues of concern. France, you see the Prime Minister there, or the President of France, Daladier, and they had their own problems, big problems. If you think about World War I and how badly France suffered, you would think that France would be Hitler's #1 critic and always there trying to stop Hitler breaking the Treaty of Versailles. And they probably would have been if they had the chance. But unfortunately, because of the Great Depression, France was in no fit state to concentrate on anything outside of France. Okay, they probably wanted to concentrate on the issue of Hitler, but people were rebelling, there were revolts on the streets, people had fallen out of love with their government. The Ladier was having a very hard time keeping the government together and pleasing the people because they were suffering so badly because of the economic depression that hit France. So France had their own issues to focus on. Moving down to the USSR, you see Stalin there with the brilliant moustache. Okay, now the USSR stood to lose a lot because of Hitler's foreign policy aims. After all, he pledged to destroy communism, hated a communist ideology, this idea that everybody is equal. Hitler believes in the master race, the superiority of the Aryan race. So to have an ideology like communism that believes in equality, that was definitely a big no-no to Hitler. Just letting Lauren in. Hi, Lauren. I'm sorry you're a little bit late. The meetings have always started at 3:15, but I had to start at 3 o'clock today because I need to get home. I've got to do something online. It's parents' evening for my daughter, so I need to get home early. So my apologies. You've already missed 15 minutes of it, but I am recording it, and I am going to post it to YouTube after, so you'll be able to watch the 15 minutes that you've missed. Actually, it's more like 10 minutes. Okay, my apologies for that. So if I bring that down. So at the moment, we're having a look at how Europe, or at least the big players in Europe in the world, reacted to Hitler's foreign policy. Hitler wanted Lebensraum, living space. He wanted to rearm. He wanted to reunite the Volksdeutsche, and he wanted to destroy communism. So all of that makes it sound like Hitler is going to go to war at some point. So maybe Britain, France, USSR, and the USA should have done more to stop him when they had the chance. And we're just saying about the USSR, they stood to lose a lot, from Hitler's foreign policy because Hitler wanted to destroy communism. And as a result of that, it pushed Stalin to form better relationships with the West. Okay, down here it says relations had started to improve in 1934 when the USSR had finally been allowed to join the League of Nations. And in 1935, they signed a mutual assistance pact with France, saying that the two would work closely together. This cooperation between Stalin's communist state and the West's capitalist states is really quite shocking, but we understand why based on Hitler's foreign policy. Unfortunately, Britain and France do their best to kind of muck up this relationship, because by about 1938, Stalin truly believes that Britain and France would not protect him against violence from Nazi Germany. And as a result of that, he starts to look towards Germany as an ally. And they sign the Nazi-Soviet pact, which is basically a non-aggression pact. Stalin thinks that he's kind of buddying up with Hitler, whereas Hitler always plans on invading the USSR, but he's biding his time. Okay, so the reaction in Soviet Russia was to make friends with France and Britain. And lastly, the USA. Hopefully you're screaming out one word: isolationism. They followed isolationism after World War I throughout the 1920s, and in the 1930s, says it there, they were no different. They continued to follow the policy of isolationism. Unemployment had skyrocketed in America because of the Wall Street crash, 1929. So throughout the 1930s, unemployment was running at 25%, 1 out of every 4 people, and sometimes worse. So America, just like France, had their own economic problems to worry about, and they did not want to be dragged into another European conflict. So the policy of isolationism continued throughout the 1930s. On top of that, in 1934, they did a poll about whether it was right or wrong to get involved in the First World War, and 70% of Americans, 70 out of every 100 people, said that it was a mistake to get involved in World War I. So there's not a chance they're going to support America getting involved in this growing European conflict. We don't have a conflict yet, but even if FDR said, look, we're going to send the troops over to support France and try to stop the rise of Hitler, the American people would have not supported it. And as a result, America continued to follow this policy of isolationism. So Hitler, in many ways, had a free rein to continue doing what he was doing. Britain is following appeasement. France has got its own massive economic problems. The USSR is in no fit state to take on Hitler by himself, so they start to buddy up with France and Britain. And the USA is following this policy of isolationism, and the people would not support the American government getting involved in another European conflict, even if it's just a growing conflict. So that's the reaction. So Hitler felt confident now to start breaking some of the Treaty of Versailles, some of the constraints of the Treaty of Versailles that have been imposed upon him and Germany after World War I. So the first thing that Germany and Hitler starts to do is rearm. This is a safe bet for Hitler. If he's going to achieve what he wants in the future, if he's going to achieve Lebensraum and destruction of communism, for example, he's going to need a strong army. He's not allowed an army. He doesn't care, okay? This is going to be his first attempt at breaking the Treaty of Versailles. And in many ways, it's a safe bet, because should all countries have an army to defend themselves? Well, yes, they should. Many people feel that the Treaty of Versailles was harsh on the Germans, so he felt that he'd probably get away with this one without too much fuss, and he was absolutely right. So all of these boxes on pages 58 and 59 relate in part to Hitler's rearmament program. I'm not an idiot, the exam board's not an idiot, you do not need to memorize everything that is written in these boxes. But if you knew a little bit about each of them, even if it was just a sentence, even if you just knew what happened, which allowed Hitler to rearm, you are showing a good understanding of the topic. So the first thing is that he leaves the disarmament conference. The League of Nations was holding a disarmament conference, and Hitler leaves when France refuses to disarm. France wants Hitler to disarm. When Hitler says, okay, we'll disarm if you do it, France says, not a chance, we're not disarming. And Hitler said, look, you're all being unfair to Germany, we're going to leave. And if he leaves the League of Nations, now he has this opportunity to do as he wishes. With the Dollfuss affair, you don't need to know too much about this, okay, especially for your mock. But it's worth pointing out that Hitler encouraged Austrian Nazis to create havoc in Austria, okay? When Dollfuss banned the Nazi party in Austria, Hitler encouraged the Austrian Nazis to create havoc, and they did, and they murdered Dollfuss. This almost paved the way for the Anschluss, which we'll look at later, but Hitler was not in a powerful position yet to take control of Austria. His army was simply too weak at this stage. Okay, so the Dollfuss affair. Over here, we've got the Tsar plebiscite. I love this timeline. How bad is it? Like, how hard is it to do a timeline? I teach year sevens how to do it, yet somebody, for some reason, who made this textbook seems to think that January comes after March, but we won't be too critical about it. Anyway, the Tsar plebiscite. This was on your mock, wasn't it? You did. The Tsar region of Germany had been given to France under the League of Nations control for 15 years. Those 15 years were now up. Rather than allow France to kind of renew this deal and keep the Tsar, Hitler was very quick to organize a plebiscite, okay? When the people, not politicians, vote on the matter, okay? Everybody in Germany has a vote. And overwhelmingly, 90% of them voted to rejoin Germany. 90% of the people living in the Tsar voted to rejoin Germany. And this is massive. How can the League of Nations, or France, or Britain, or even America, if they chose to, argue against this? And it allowed Hitler to break a term of the Treaty of Versailles and reclaim something which he probably shouldn't have had. March 1935, the rearmament rally, okay, he basically shows the world that he is rearmed. He shows the world that he has a Luftwaffe. He reintroduces conscription, all against the Treaty of Versailles. Shows that his army has increased to 1 million men. He's not allowed to do any of this. But he gambles that Britain and France, they got their own problems, and they won't worry too much about Germany rearming because, hey, every country should have an army to defend itself. And that's all that Hitler's doing here. It's not that bad. We mentioned the Stresa front, where Britain, France, and Italy agreed to protect Austrian independence. Okay, said to Austria, hey, look, we'll protect you from Hitler. That didn't work out. And then lastly, the Anglo-German naval agreement, where Britain agreed that Hitler could increase his navy to 35% the size of the British Navy, which still meant that Hitler would actually have quite a big navy because the British Navy is the biggest in the world. So this is potentially allowing Hitler, giving Hitler the green light to increase his navy. And this is worrying. It shows how disjointed this approach to Hitler was. If one country felt it was in their interest, then they acted alone rather than a united front against Hitler. So, all of this relates to his rearmament program, besides the Versailles plebiscite, and I suppose the Stresa front. Now, please do not think that you need to memorize this. If you just memorize or remember the fact that Hitler left the disarmament conference, and then March 1935 he shows off this army to the world, and the Anglo-German naval agreement, if you can remember those three things, and you end up writing about this, you would do very, very well. You don't have to remember everything. Okay, so maybe those are the three important boxes to focus on when we are thinking about rearming. He leaves the League of Nations Disarmament Conference and he starts rebuilding his army. He shows the world in March 1935 that he has this army, and in June he signs the Anglo-German Naval Agreement, which allows him to increase the size of his navy legally, but technically all against the Treaty of Versailles. So Hitler, his first bash, I suppose, first attempt at breaking the Treaty of Versailles has gone very successfully. It's not gone bad at all. So you can imagine that Hitler's confidence has grown. So now he starts to look at how else he can break the Treaty of Versailles. What else needs to be done for him to achieve his foreign policy aims? And next, we are going to have a look at the reoccupation of the Rhineland, the remilitarization of the Rhineland. Okay, just going to give you a few seconds if you're writing the title. So having a look at the Rhineland. So under the Treaty of Versailles, the Rhineland, you can see it here. Here's the German-French border, dark line just there. Okay, the pink bit is the Rhineland. And under the Treaty of Versailles, it had been demilitarized. This created a buffer zone between France and Germany. It meant that the German military was never on the French border. The French military was always on the German border, but the German military could never be on the French border because this area was to be demilitarized. It created this buffer zone and it kept the French happy. It made it feel like they would have time if the Germans ever decided to invade. Okay, so where's the highlighter there? Lebensraum. This is important. This is why Hitler wanted to re-enter, remilitarize the Rhineland. Because if he's going to achieve Lebensraum, room to live in the east, living space in the east, he needs to secure his French border. Because France, in 1935, made an agreement with the Soviet Union, a mutual assistance pact, okay, to support each other. So if Germany invades Poland, let's say, it's this big country just next to it here, potentially France could hit Germany from one side, and France's ally, the Soviet Union, could hit Germany from another side, catching Germany in this pincer-type movement. He knows that if he invades countries in the east, it's going to provoke a potential response, and he needs to be prepared to deal with that response. And that means securing this border with France. And that meant getting his troops back into the Rhineland. Okay, that's really, really important. You need to know this. this whole section on the Rhineland is really, really important. Okay, so if he's going to achieve Lebensraum, he needs to secure that border with France. And I've already mentioned it, the event that prompted him, or at least he said it prompted him to remilitarize the Rhineland, was the French and the Soviet Union Franco-Soviet Pact. Hitler said that he was now surrounded by enemies and he needed to secure his borders for the protection of Germany, not to invade other countries. Hell no, not to invade other countries. This was purely for the protection of Germany, because now Germany was surrounded by enemies. And from a British and a French, not so much a French, but from a British point of view, and even an American point of view, this kind of made sense. France was an enemy of Germany. The USSR has promised to support France. Germany could be feeling threatened. They could be feeling scared. So yes, they should be allowed to defend their border. And that prompted the Americans to say, well, look, Hitler's not doing anything bad. All he's doing is marching his troops into his own backyard. And the British agreed with that totally. Many politicians in Britain, many of the British public, felt that this wasn't actually a big deal. And the Treaty of Versailles was so unbelievably harsh on Hitler and Germany that this is justified. This is understandable. Okay? And as a result, not a lot happened. And when Hitler did it, says it here, he was treated like a flipping hero. The people of the Rhineland lined the streets. They sung for him. They danced for him. Children threw flowers at the soldiers' feet. Women tried to pin badges to the soldiers. Hitler and his armies, generals, they were treated like heroes. And again, that boosts Hitler's confidence. Nothing is being done to stop him. The people of Germany start to look upon him as a savior type figure. So you can understand why he continued to push his luck. And if we look just down here, it explains some of the reasons why Britain did not react. Okay, and it says that many people in Britain felt Germany had a right to defend their own borders. Makes sense. British troops were already busy dealing with the Italian invasion of Abyssinia. Now, it says dealing with it. It's not like British troops went over there, but the army was on alert about this invasion of Abyssinia, and there was no desire from the army to go and stop Hitler. No general felt it was a big deal, as neither did the politicians. The Great Depression had hit Britain hard, and like many countries, we were still focusing on our own problems. And many people believed that Hitler was justified in reclaiming this area anyway. Politicians in France had been busy fighting a general election, and nobody wanted to potentially lose votes. So they all focused on improving the economy of France and not worrying about Hitler. The French army, just like the British army, had been stationed abroad to deal with the Abyssinian crisis, although there wasn't really much of an intervention. And French generals believed that the German army entering the Rhineland was much larger and better equipped than it actually was. Okay, they felt that the German army was really, really strong. But actually, the German army was incredibly weak at this stage, and Hitler could have been stopped. It says down here that the German army generals had warned Hitler, if France decides to uphold the Treaty of Versailles and move its army into the Rhineland to stop Germany invading, then it could be disastrous for Germany. They would be the losers of another conflict and probably forced to pay even bigger fines than they had before. No doubt the British and the French army would probably invade Germany. So this truly was a huge gamble, but the gamble paid off because Britain and France concentrated on their own problems and felt that Germany was justified in doing this. And as a result, Hitler's confidence grew. It grew massive, okay? And he started to look for other ways that he might get around the Treaty of Versailles, and that's the Anschluss, and that comes next. Okay. And then I scroll up to this bit just here. So Hitler's gamble did pay off. It also paid off because it encouraged Mussolini to sign a non-aggression pact with Hitler. Remember the Strasser Front, where Britain France and Italy had signed an agreement to work together to combat the rise of Hitler. Well, this is now Mussolini going back on that agreement. He now sees that actually Germany is a force to be reckoned with. And Italy is now putting its, if we're talking about putting eggs into a basket, it's putting all of its eggs in this basket. It's now siding with the group which they think would potentially win a war. They're siding with Hitler because they feel they will get more out of that agreement. So they signed the Rome-Berlin Axis, which basically means that they are now going to work together. This is a disaster for the League of Nations. This is a disaster for Britain and France, who have been so worried about the rise of Hitler for so long. One of the reasons they didn't really get involved in the Abyssinian crisis was not to anger Mussolini in the hope that he would work with them to combat the threat of Hitler. Well, whilst the Abyssinian crisis is still going on, Mussolini signs this pact with Hitler. Okay, so the two are now agreeing to work together. And lastly, down at the bottom of where this gamble paid off, well, absolutely. It meant that Hitler could now concentrate on Lebensraum because he has secured his border with France. So, this is the second way that Hitler tried to break, or the second term of the Treaty of Versailles that Hitler broke. He started to rearm, that went well, then he upped the ante a little bit, and he moved his troops back into Rhineland. But this is still small scale, okay? He's not invading other countries yet. You've got to remember, Rhineland was part of Germany after all, and he's not invading it as such. He's just moving his troops back into a part of his own country. He's testing the water. He's seeing how the League of Nations and how Britain and France and his enemies would react excuse me, to him breaking the Treaty of Versailles. And unfortunately, they showed weakness. Britain with appeasement, America with isolationism, France focusing on their own economic problems, and Hitler's gamble paid off and his confidence grew. And I would definitely be revising this. So, what's the time, Mr. Wolf? We've got about 7 minutes left. So let's have a little look at the Anschluss. This comes next. This is the next, sorry, 1 second. This is the next area of the Treaty of Versailles that Hitler decided to tackle. Okay, because under the Treaty of Versailles, the unification of Austria and Germany had been banned. Okay, and there's this worry that if they created this one big kind of super country in many ways, it would be too powerful in Europe. And under the Treaty of Versailles, they were not allowed to unite. But Hitler, had always had his eyes set on Austria. Hitler was Austrian after all. And two countries were very, very similar, okay? Austria had ruled Germany for over 600 years. They had similar cultures, a shared language, a shared history. They were essentially, and had been essentially, one country for a long, long time, okay? And Hitler always spoke about the unification, again, of Germany and Austria, the Anschluss. Okay? And this would achieve two of Hitler's foreign policy aims. One, it would unite German speakers into a greater Germany. Austrians spoke German. Okay? And secondly, it would destroy, or at least stick two fingers up, to one aspect of the Treaty of Versailles. And Hitler hated the Treaty of Versailles. The German people hated the Treaty of Versailles. So the more Hitler broke it, the more he would be treated like a hero, a godlike figure at home. Not by everybody, but by most people. Okay. So, what happened? Now, it's always good if you know the account of what happened during the Anschluss. Okay, there is a question on the exam where you might choose to write about this, and it's always good if you do know some of the detail. But again, look at all of this information here. You're not expected to memorize it. You're expected to have an overview of what happened during the Anschluss. Just in case you get asked a question to write an account of it, for example, and they want you to write a detailed story of what happened with the German invasion of Austria. So, a few key bits to to focus on is Dollfuss. Remember Dollfuss? He was killed when Hitler encouraged Austrian Nazis to create havoc throughout the early 1930s, wasn't it? I gotta look at the date, sorry. Yeah, 1934. It says it there. Should have just looked at the screen. Okay, and Schuschnigg now replaced Dollfuss as the leader of Austria. And Schuschnigg was not an idiot, okay? He was worried about the Nazis, and he made a deal with them, okay? He said, look, for your support, if you support me, I will give Nazis key positions within the Austrian government. And that seemed like a decent deal. It meant that Schuschnigg didn't really have to worry about the Nazis, or at least he thought he didn't have to worry about them, and he gave Nazis some key jobs within the government, the Austrian government. But by 1938, so 4 years later, the Austrian police, they end up raiding the Nazi party headquarters in Austria, and they discovered plans to overthrow Schuschnigg. It looked like Schuschnigg probably panicked now. It looked like he might be murdered, or at least forced out of his job. So it says there, panic, Schuschnigg now meets with Hitler. Hitler comes along with 3 big burly generals to intimidate Schuschnigg. See a picture of Schuschnigg just down there. See him? Little bowler hat with glasses, little moustache. He's not a fighter, he's not a soldier, and he was easily intimidated. And to be fair, he had little say over what was going to be agreed. And he agreed, see it there, he agreed that a Nazi solicitor named Serge Inquart can be Minister of Interior with full power over the Austrian police. So now we have a Nazi in charge of the Austrian police force. We have a Nazi in charge of the Austrian finances and in charge of the Austrian War Department. It looks like the Nazis are slowly taking over the Austrian government. Okay? Now, Schuschnigg, there's a bit of a plan, okay, to combat this. It says it there. I glossed over it, I'm sorry. Schuschnigg was meant to lift the restrictions placed on the Austrian Nazi Party and release those Nazis from prison. And he had to make all of these changes in 3 days, okay, and sign it into law. Before he did that, he had a bit of a plan. He held a plebiscite because he knew that Hitler's proposed Anschluss could only happen if the Austrian people supported it. So if you had a vote and the Austrian people said, no, 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 we don't want Anschluss, then Hitler would lose his right to invade. So Schuschnigg wanted to quickly hold a plebiscite. Now, Hitler realized what could happen, and there's no way on earth he was going to allow a plebiscite to happen. And he demanded that it be postponed, and Schuschnigg, fearing that he would not be supported by Britain and France if he defied Hitler, agreed. And in the end, Hitler forced Schuschnigg to resign, basically gun to his head. I'm not sure if it happened quite like that, but Schuschnigg feared for his life. And as a result, Serge Inquart, the current Minister of Interior in charge of the army and the police, now took over as Chancellor, the leader of the Austrian government. And straight away, he immediately calls in the Germans. He says that Austria is in a state of chaos and he needs the German army to support him. So the German army is given a green light to start the Anschluss, to invade Austria. And soon as the Anschluss is complete, by April the 10th, Hitler holds another plebiscite. And this time, 99% of Austrians vote in favour of it. And again, Hitler's saying to the world, isn't he? It's like, how can you argue with this? How can you stop me doing this when everybody in Austria wants it to happen? Now, was it a fair vote? Absolutely not. You can imagine the Nazi stormtroopers lining the doors to the voting halls and intimidating people to vote the correct way. Because if you don't, who knows what might happen to you. So that's an account of the Anschluss and how it happened. What we will go on to and look at next time is the reaction to the Anschluss. Why didn't Britain stop Hitler? Why didn't France stop Hitler? What did Czechoslovakia have to fear so much? And we'll also look at why the Austrians and the Germans were pretty happy about the Anschluss. Okay, we'll do that next week. We'll also have a look at the Sudeten crisis, where Hitler wants the Sudetenland, and it's agreed that he could have the Sudetenland as long as he doesn't invade the rest of Czechoslovakia, and that was the Munich Agreement which he signed. Within 6 months, Hitler invades the rest of Czechoslovakia, breaking the Munich Agreement. And this is significant because this is the first time that he's invaded a country to which he has no real claim. There are no German speakers really living in Czechoslovakia, and as such, he doesn't really have a right to invade. So this is a worrying development. And then we'll have a quick look at the Nazi-Soviet Pact and how that gave Hitler the green light to invade Poland, and then Nazi-Soviet Pact again. And then we will look at the declaration of war, where Britain and France declares war on Nazi Germany. Okay, so we will do that next time. So we will finish the Anschluss, look at the Sudeten crisis and the Munich Agreement, the Nazi-Soviet Pact, and then the outbreak of war. So, sorry to cut it a little bit short. I'd like to carry on. No, Ethan, we won't look at the phony war, unfortunately. We're not looking at anything to really do with the war as such. As soon as war is declared, our topic ends. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording now, and I'm going to bid you farewell because, like I said, I need to get home for my daughter's parents' evening. So take care, everybody. Look after yourselves, and I will see you very soon when you're back in school and we can talk face to face finally and prepare you properly for your mock exam. You're preparing properly anyway, just by being here. You're listening to important bits which are going to come up. Okay, so take care, everybody. Bye-bye.